AkzoNobel, the premium paint demand. Let's try and decode that. What's their distribution strategy? How is it that they're dealing with the surge in input prices? A lot of questions. So let me welcome on board Oscar Wezenbeek as well as Rajiv Rajgopal, both from AkzoNobel, on the show right now. Gentlemen, great to have you both on the show. Oscar, if I could start with you first. You know, the last 2 quarters for the company have indicated that there has been a turnaround for AkzoNobel, and that's back with a bang. You've put in a series of measures from launches in the eco segment to more penetration. How's that contributed to growth in the past? And how do you think the vision really for AkzoNobel in the next 5 years is like?
No, thank you very much for the question. And if you allow me, first, thank you very much for having me on the show. I do want to acknowledge that this is a horrible and extraordinary period we lived through. And I'm so proud of the team that despite the incredible challenge of COVID, where we really pulled together, both internally through our We Care program for our people, but also through our Aroja Saka program to really reach out and support the 1.5 million painters in the community. And learning from the experience in 2020, where we also stood by our people in the time when AkzoNobel had the strategy of really focusing and becoming a paint and coatings company, focusing on the 15 by 20 strategy. If you put it all together, during the period where we showed to our partners, the stores, our distributors, our employees, that we stand by them through thick and thin, together with our leading brands, we really have a very strong foundation for indeed profitable growth. And as AkzoNobel has come out of that 15 by 20 period, as we called it very successfully, despite COVID reaching those targets, we now have a fantastic platform for growth, and you see it in a very strong first quarter result of 2021, where AkzoNobel showed a 16% overall revenue growth. And to come back to your question, it really was across all segments, across all countries where we saw that growth materializing. You can argue it's a bit from a somewhat smaller base compared to 2020, when, for example, China was already seeing and feeling the impact of COVID. But this year, a very robust performance, both in top-line growth and also in increasing profitability.
Sure. Rajiv, I want to get you in here. Morning, firstly. How is it that you've seen the volume growth with all the measures put in place in the fourth quarter, and how do you see your volumes actually pan out going forward?
So good morning, and a warm welcome to also all the viewers. Thank you for having me on the show. I think Oscar and I are delighted to be with ET now. Indeed, ET is not just my favorite newspaper in the morning, but also a channel with whom I learn so much. On the business of the fourth quarter, I think the good part was it was secular. It was across the portfolio. It was across geographies. Remember, in the fourth quarter, the COVID cases in India had significantly dropped after the first wave. And we were seeing a bit of what we internally call a bit of a bullwhip, which basically means you started seeing demand going a little higher than estimated. And the reason for that was two, because you had the metros come back. And as a result, we started seeing some of our premium brands grow. Now, what we did to fuel that was basically we launched a program called Dulux Assurance, which played into the core of what Dulux stands for, which is unmatched quality. And that was the sort of promise we gave our customers and consumers. And we are rolling it across the Southeast South Asia region that Oscar sort of now handles, is in charge of. And so that was the sort of thought leadership that we wanted to bring in, but it was secular. We also, through our distribution strategy 1.0, actually started getting some benefits of moving to a distributor channel. Remember that we've now got more than 170 distributor stock points now. And so hence our ability to reach and service the market was better. Is that enough? No. I think there are certain challenges. As you know, in the last month or so, we've seen the second wave. It's been a little harder this time. And obviously, the lockdowns have been more stringent in this particular. So we do see a bit of a challenge, and a short-term challenge from a quarter two perspective, but we are sort of fully poised from a full year perspective.
Okay, fair enough. Oscar, coming back to you, let's talk about the impact of the second wave. What was April, May like vis-a-vis March, for instance? What are the kind of the kind of impact that you've seen given the current product mix? Were premium products hit a little harder during this time, and has that made you more vulnerable to the second wave? What are some of the trends that really emerged?
Yeah, so one of the things that is a question on everybody's lips is really the rebound and the growth that we saw in the decorative paint businesses across the world. Will that continue? And actually, we are quite bullish about it. So we saw in North Europe, where you more have a do-it-yourself market, where people during lockdown really started to work on home improvement in general. And we see actually that trend continuing. So in the first quarter, we saw a very robust growth. And also the indication we have now as the second quarter is starting is that is indeed continuing. Probably that has to do with the fact that people are more working from home now. So they appreciate their living environment more. And that will continue that trend. Across the world, we see demand very strong. We see it in South America. We see it in China, but also indeed in Southeast and South Asia. We see that decorative is very robust. We're very bullish about that segment, actually. Obviously, there might be peaks and troughs depending on the pandemic and the lockdowns that we see. Fortunately, now the cases in India is dropping below 100,000. We see some of the states and cities opening up again. That will definitely have an impact for sure, as we saw last year. In other countries in the region, we actually see lockdowns being announced or extended. Think about Malaysia, for example. So there will be impact there on the business in the decorative segment there overall. Interesting to see in our business that the project business is doing quite well, very robust, which is very encouraging to see. Moving to the performance coatings units, actually most segments are doing very well. For example, our powder segment, in which AkzoNobel is a clear leader in the market, a very robust segment that we see. Segments, on the other hand, that were more under pressure, like oil and marine, there we see clearly the impact of the industry overall going through a tough period. But on the other hand, it's very heartening to see that we see early signs of recovery in the aerospace industry. So putting all together, I believe AkzoNobel coming out of that 15 by 20 period, now really pivoting towards a grow and deliver strategy. We have made a very robust start in the first quarter of the year, and we do expect that momentum to continue with at least market, if not above market growth in most of our regions and segments.
Okay, all right. So that's the kind of outlook coming in there from Oscar. Let me also get your perspective on that as well, Rajiv, in terms of how you see things shaping up now going forward. Give me a sense, at the company, really, how you feel. The outlook will be, given also some of the current rising costs that we're seeing companies grappling with at this point of time. We've seen a V-shaped move in most of your input costs, in fact, from crude, HDPE to tin. So how is the impact of this likely to be going forward?
Yeah, I think a very relevant and pertinent question. So firstly, from an India perspective, if you really look at, May obviously across the country, across categories, and you've covered most of it, has obviously been a bit of a challenge, primarily because the lockdowns were far more stringent than it was last year, when actually the markets had slowly started after May opening up. So I think that's where it is. But I think fortunately, as Oscar mentioned, the cases have come down and many states have started at least the unlock equivalent of 1.0, which got announced. And of course, it's measured in different markets, and we are obviously sizing it. And obviously, this quarter would, to that extent, be a bit of a challenge, from a market itself, availability point of view. But, I think the flip side of it is, again, Oscar alluded to it, is the projects part of the business. So fortunately, this time the construction sector has been relatively insulated, and at least the large builders who are able to make sure that their people could stay on site and provide all the support from a COVID perspective and have seen a little bit of work going in. And that's one area where we see, at least in some parts of infrastructure, some parts of building and construction, their work is at least not completely stopped. So we've seen that's been a bit of, I think a favorable win that has happened in the last month. But again, that's a small constituent. It basically constitutes only 30% of our business. So at an aggregate level, yes, me has been a bit challenging. Now, in terms of raw material, I think I've mentioned it. The raw material costs have sort of gone up. We believe that the raw material costs are still going up. Remember that we are very clear that we provide the best products, and as a result of which, that's something that we do not compromise. And all the programs we do on value engineering are all around processes and other stuff, but not on the product per se. Yeah, and that's something that we've at least we've been very clear over the last decade that we continue to sort of flourish and take forward. And that's the confidence we have on the brand. So yes, we've announced 2 price increases. We've taken a 3% equivalent price increase in May. We've announced a 5% increase in June, and we'll wait and watch the space. I think we have to be a little practical about it. We also want to be a responsible player in the industry, because if you look at our ecosystem, our suppliers, vendors, all of them are getting impacted. And I think we as a player in India want to be seen as a responsible player, as a player which is also supporting the ecosystem. We've seen a lot of small and medium enterprise getting impacted. And, in our endeavor of growth, we want to make sure we add to the growth, but not, we don't want to do anything which is going to be diluted from a society point of view.
Sure. Rajiv, just wanted to understand, given that your presence is more in the premium segment versus the mid to low segments, which segment will the new launches belong to?
So last year we went and entered into the economy segment with a brand Dulux Promise Smart Choice. That was primarily because we really saw that was the vehicle that we really wanted to use to start entering into smaller towns. And that was a part of what we are working on as a team in terms of distribution 2.0, of how do we now start entering into smaller towns. We are looking at some more parts of the portfolio. What we also did is on the flagship premium, because as you do this, the last thing you want is a bit of down trading. Now, remember, if you take a last 4-year CAGR, about 70-75% of the growth has largely come from mass markets and waterproofing. And so on these 2 segments, we had a lot of launches. We've started participating in the growth in these segments, and we see it continuing to be favorable. But at the same point of time, the last thing we want is down trading. So as a result, we've also strengthened our premium brands. So, what we've done is we've taken innovations like, antibacterial, antiviral, rather than launching separate brands, we've put these propositions into our core brands. And, I think Oscar and I are working for some more stuff. Hopefully, we'll come back to you maybe before Diwali. We are planning to put some more products using our global learnings in South Asia of certain flagship brands that could help to continue from a sustainability point of view, also support the India as a whole.
Rajiv, just to follow up to the point that you were earlier making, are you worried at all about losing market share, given that there have been high price hikes?
So, let's just sort of break it into 2 parts. I think, we did lose some market share in 2017-18. We are on a journey of correcting and trying to do it, looking at the addressable segments and working on proposition at this point of time. To your question, look, it's a fine balance. I think what we need to do is to look at market share versus making sure that you do not erode profitability, because that's the trade-off we are carefully managing. Obviously, we are going to be very measured in terms of how we do it. But at this point of time, as we speak to you, the raw materials are actually seeing a terrific surge. And one of the challenges, and you've seen the last quarter results of the industry, and not just of us paints, but even if you look at the rest of the industry, you've seen an erosion of contribution margin of most companies by 3 to 4 to 5%. I think we need to be careful, because there are 2 parts to it. You've got to be careful while doing it, so that as you enter into the addressable segments, you will otherwise see a further erosion. So I think it's managing that balance that is there. We will be careful, but as I said, I think we are trying to manage the market share profitability in a fair manner as we move forward.
All right, thanks very much for joining in and sharing with us your outlook and giving us a sense as to how business is shaping up.